I had a friend that was visiting her neck was hurting, her shoulder was hurting. Here, let me try this. I started running energy like he showed. Worked about 45 minutes. He's like, I think you got something here. The pain less. And I did this workshop. It was a connection that I had never experienced. And I realized it's really been me that's been in my own way, getting caught in my head, not letting myself experience the connection the way that human beings are meant to experience them.
I got to meet you at Becoming More in Florida, and I thought it was really interesting how you had found out so briefly about QuantumTouch before. So maybe you can talk about that. Like, how did you find out about QuantumTouch and what brought you to Florida?
Sure. It was interesting because you were the first person I met, actually, the very first person. I found QuantumTouch at the beginning of this February. So it's only been, about 8 weeks now. I had been struggling with trying to find my purpose in life. I'm an engineer, I'm a technologist. I've been doing cellular technology integration for, 25 years now. I was doing it before anybody really knew that you could do all the interesting things you could do with it now that everybody has smartphones. It never really fulfilled what I felt I should be doing. I felt like I was always seeking the next thing. And as I've gotten older and gone through all the life experience that I've gone through, all the challenges, I just didn't really feel like I was accomplishing what I should be accomplishing. And I found another podcast towards the end of last year, and I started listening to it and found a few different interesting interviews that he had done that caught my attention. So I started listening more. And had found one on the Akashic Records. And I didn't know anything about the Akashic Record. I ended up getting an Akashic Record reading. And it basically, my question was, why am I here? What should I be doing that I'm not doing? And the answer was pretty much, you have everything you need. You just really need to get out of your own way is what it boiled down to. It's like, okay, well, that's not really helpful because I didn't really know what that meant. So, but I had started meditating, at the beginning of the year, and that's something I haven't done a lot of since I was a teenager. And so I started looking at myself internally and reflecting upon that. And I guess about 3 days after that reading, I was watching a podcast and I wasn't particularly interested in the topic. So I started perusing the description and it was in YouTube, and it said free healing lesson. I'm like, interesting, because it triggered a memory when I was in about 16 or 17. I had a friend that was more like an older sister to me, and she was very, very much in tune with herself. She was operating at a higher frequency. Now I understand that. I didn't understand that at the time. And she had a friend that visited her that said she was a witch. And I found that interesting, a little bit unnerving, because I didn't really know what that meant. Witches to me were Halloween, and I didn't really get it. But she said, come here. I was standing there and I walked over to her and she said, put your hands out. And I put my hands out. And she said, and she said, she put her hands up underneath mine and closed her eyes. And after a few seconds, she looked at me and she said, you're a healer. And okay, my 17-year-old mind was like, okay, great. What? I didn't know what that meant. I just thought she was a little bit not quite right. But it always kind of stayed with me. So when I found that link, it was interesting because it triggered that memory from so long ago. And so I clicked it, and it took me to another site where there was a short tiny little window with a video of Richard Gordon speaking about energy and healing and moving bones with energy. And I'm like, wow, that's interesting, because I knew about energy because at that same time when I was 17, I was taking martial arts, and my martial arts instructor introduced me to how to feel energy. And it was more of a bar trick to him, I think, than anything, because it never really went more beyond being able to sense it. So I would practice and, never really did anything with it. I was just kind of playing with the energy. And then over time, something I stopped doing. But when I saw Richard and he was talking about it, and he said that he was asked, how would you tell somebody to feel energy? And he held up his finger and he said, okay, focus on your finger
Mhm.
and put all of your intention on the tip of your finger and describe what you feel. Do you feel a tingling? Do you feel, and as soon as he said that, I was like, wow, that's it. That's what
Mhm.
I know how to do. And I've been doing it for so long. And I didn't even watch the rest of the video. I went looking for the link to the website and I found QuantumTouch and I found his original course, which is what they were trying to steer you towards.
Mhm.
And it wasn't free, but it wasn't expensive either. So I'm like, okay, this is easy. I'll do this. So
Mhm.
I started watching the course, and I'm like, this is amazing. And the things that were happening during the class were just blew my mind. I'm like, this is what I was asking for. I was asking for a mentor. I was asking for somebody to teach me what direction to go. I'm like, this is it. I just knew it. And I didn't even finish like halfway through the first day of the course. I watched it was broken up into a bunch of little videos, and I watched about half of them. And I had a friend that was visiting who was saying her neck was hurting, her shoulder was hurting. Like, here, let me try this. And so I started running energy like he showed, and worked about 45 minutes on her shoulder. And she's like, I think you got something here, because the pain lessened. It didn't go away, but it lessened considerably. And when I was done, it was I had been running so much energy I could barely speak. I was buzzing. I it took me about 30 minutes or more before I was able to actually uh, construct a sentence that
Mhm.
wasn't all over the place. And it was funny, even my dog, I have a German Shepherd, even my dog was like, he just wasn't really sure because he could sense it. He knew something was up, because I
Mhm.
couldn't even get him to come over to me. He went over and kind of hid under the hid under the steps and kind of just watched me for a while. And because he knew this isn't normal. He's got something going on. So I'm like, I knew for a fact that I was onto something.
Mhm.
And I knew for a fact that it was something I could do,
Yeah.
because I had been doing it. I just hadn't been doing it with enough intention.
So now all
And
of this happened within a couple days. That would have been beginning of February.
yeah,
And
yeah,
then
absolutely. So
did you
I went
read
through
the
the rest of the
book or did
course.
you reach out for becoming more?
No, what I did was I finished the course and then I
Okay.
went and got the book. I got both books. I got the one on Quantum Touch 1 and Quantum Touch 2.
Hmm.
And I read both of them.
Hmm.
And by the end of the week, I had read both books.
Hmm.
I mean, I just was just absolutely 100% hyper focused on it at that point.
Hmm.
And I even went and looked and found Miriam had a level 1 class that weekend, and I
Okay.
reached out to her and tried to I tried to take her class, and she had a conflict and had to cancel it. And I'm like,
Okay.
oh no. So now what? And then I had seen the banner for Becoming More, and I'm like, I don't know. It sounds like that's an advanced thing. Maybe I need to take the level 1 before I do
Yeah.
that. And this was a few weeks before. It was like 2 or 3 weeks before the Becoming More class. The next week, I found out that my company was going to have a corporate event that I had to attend, and it was in Orlando. And since the Becoming More event was in Kissimmee, that's real close to where
Hmm.
this, my corporate event was. So I'm like, well, maybe this is something I should do. And I just didn't do it. And then the week before my corporate event and the Becoming More conference, I remember it was a Sunday. I said, oh, I think I'm being prompted to do this. I just felt like I needed to do it. And I went out and the link was gone.
Mm.
So now I'm panicking. So I'm like, okay, I know this without a doubt is something I need to do. So I reached out and that Sunday with an email. I'm like, is the link gone? Is it full? Can I still go? And then I got a response from Jennifer. She said, yeah, I'll send you a link. And she sent me a link, and I paid paid the fee and signed up, and then went and looked for a hotel room and was able to get a hotel room. I'm like, this is, if for all this to fall together in that short amount of time, I said, this is something I need to do. And so I went to my corporate event, and then the Friday, but that before the Becoming More conference, I left one hotel and drove 15 minutes to the other hotel, and I was there, and it was just amazing. I was nervous. I was sort of apprehensive, thinking maybe I'm not going to fit in, maybe I'm not going to be good enough, or
Mm-hmm.
not going to be able to be advanced enough to participate. But I was totally wrong. Just from the time I met you to the next day when we did had the workshop, I just felt like I had found my long lost family. It was I'm not a I'm not a people person. I tend to keep to myself. I don't interact a lot. I have a small circle of friends. But when I did this workshop, it was a connection that I had never experienced.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that all of this time that it's taken me to find it, it's really been me that's been in my own way,
Mm-hmm.
getting caught in my head, not not letting myself experience the connections the way that human beings are meant to experience them. And it was all because I was taught wrong. Society taught me wrong. Society put the limitations in my head, and then I just hung on to them because that's what I was told.
I mean, there's so
um
much beauty in everything that you're saying there. I mean, first of all, to come from no energy background and to have this experience, and I can definitely relate to that too. When I signed up for my first level 1 workshop, I didn't even know what a chakra was. So when they're like, we're going to learn about chakras, I was like, what's a chakra? Like, I
See,
didn't
I had
think
learned
I
that
would
from
fit
my
in.
friend who was like the
Pardon?
big sister I never
Yeah.
had, right? Way back when I was a teenager, but I never really put much, oh, this is like ancient
Yeah.
superstitious stuff.
Yeah. So just learning it, and even for myself, when I first remember learning to run the energy through my body, like the whole field with your finger exercise, like that tingly and buzzy. I was like, oh, I know this feeling. This is when I had my babies and I did skin to skin. Like I felt this before, and it just was so real. And then, yeah, when we learn in the workshop, you were talking about the original online, the one Richard speaks, the recorded one online, but it's the same thing. Just we teach to move that energy through your body and through the sweeps, and you feel it. It's tangible, and then you start to have these moments where like, wait a minute, I felt this before. I know this.
Exactly. And I think everybody has the capability for
Mhm.
this. Is not
Mhm.
something that's some weird gift that only
Mhm.
certain people have. Each individual might be at a different point in their journey, the highest level they can be, but we all have it. We all have this
Mhm.
capability because we're all connected.
Mhm.
And I think what you have to do is learn to recognize the subtleness
Mhm.
of it. It's very subtle, and you
Mhm.
have to pay attention to yourself. You have to pay
Mhm.
attention, meditate, really quiet your mind. And that's another thing that I never understood. I struggled with depression for a greater part of my adult life. It runs in my family. From the time I got divorced back in 2008, I really struggled with it. Did the medication thing and was told by many psychiatrists, several, that you'll never be off these. This is a vitamin to you. You got to take this every day.
Mhm.
And I just wouldn't accept that.
Mhm.
And it was a long, hard struggle, but I kept working for it. I kept working to
Mhm.
find the things that triggered me, the things that helped me, and focus on the things that helped me. Because I knew getting caught in your head and focusing on the negative was not going to do it.
Mhm.
You have to find the positive, even if you don't feel it. You have to
Mhm.
keep looking until you do.
Mhm.
And I think just doing that with that intention,
Mhm.
energy follows intention, right?
Mhm.
So, and that's the
Mhm.
big lesson here that I had to learn, and I had to keep
Mhm.
with that intention. I was able to beat it. I was able to get off the
Mhm.
medications, and I've been
Mhm.
off them for several years. And even after several years of being off of them, it still took me time to really be ready to be open to this.
Mhm.
Um, and it wasn't until I started meditating and letting all of the thought, a misconception I think is that you have to clear your head. You don't have to clear your head. You're going to get thoughts. Things are going to bubble up.
Mhm.
But that's just all the negativity coming out.
Mhm.
So when you're doing it, you just acknowledge it. Okay, yeah, okay, that's a thought, and don't get caught on it. Just get back to what you were doing and let all that go. And then what
Mhm.
happens is soon those they stop coming.
Mhm.
And now you are quiet. You can pay attention to yourself.
Mhm.
You can pay
Mhm.
attention to what you feel, and you
Mhm.
you 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 get into a place where you're so relaxed and at peace that you could just be there for a lot longer than you realize.
Well,
Um, it,
I mean, there's so many things in there I want to talk about, but like the connection that has always been huge for me. And I mean, really, to do this work, we're just tuning into ourselves
mhm,
and we're learning to be present and place our attention in our body. Notice where that attention is going, because where our attention goes, energy flows. And it becomes this the moment we connect with ourselves and we feel that internally, it just creates that space where we can connect outwards.
exactly.
And I mean, I play with this all the time, and so many things. I was like, QuantumTouch has also helped me to develop my intuitive skills, but I feel like I just say stuff and I don't even know why I say stuff. Like, I homeschool. People ask, why do you homeschool? And I was like,
Mhm.
well, I just want my kids to be able to create meaningful relationships. As long as they can read, write, create meaningful relationships, I think they'll do well. And then I'm like, why do I always say meaningful relationships or like that meaningful connection? And I get it now. It's like learning to just be present and connect within. But then that also ties into what you were saying about like thoughts and stuff bubbling up, because I mean, that's just what's stored within us that we didn't want to see previously. So once we allow
Mhm.
ourselves just to be present with all that that's coming up, well, then we can just love that part of ourselves. And it shifts, like the energy just shifts in those moments when we tune in with that love.
That's the trick. That really
Yeah.
is the trick. And I think what happens is people get afraid of
Yeah.
looking inside themselves because of the pain they might be experiencing through
Mhm.
whatever events. And so they don't want to look inward because they don't want to experience that pain.
Mhm.
But it doesn't last as long as you think once you
Mhm.
confront it. They always say confront your fears and you can get
Mhm.
past them. And
Mhm.
whatever, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. All of that's true. But really, what it is, it boils down to looking inward, looking at
Mhm.
those things and realizing it's not the end. It's just temporary. And you got to get past it. And you continue to look inward and you continue to look for the positive and you continue to look
Mhm.
for love,
Mhm.
and don't get bitter, don't carry the negativity and the things that keep you down, that keep that energy level in the lower frequencies.
Mhm.
It's a
Mhm.
hard thing to understand, even being a technologist and understanding frequency and communication and radio and all of
Mhm.
that. It's all the same. It's all energy.
Mhm.
And when you start focusing on raising that and looking for the positive, just simply looking for the positive, your energy level will come up. You'll start raising
Mhm.
your frequency. You'll start
Mhm.
making those connections. And what you're going to find
Mhm.
is, with the intent of doing that,
Mhm.
people will come into your life. Things will come into your life. I'm a prime example. Once I
Mhm.
started looking for those things and being
Mhm.
open to those things, they were there,
Mhm.
and they were there in ways that I didn't expect. I just had to
Mhm.
be present. I had to be
Mhm.
paying attention. I had to be
Mhm.
open to it. And once that
Mhm.
happened, it was like floodgates opening.
Well, that's
And
essentially it. It's just choosing where you want to place your focus, right? What you want to see.
absolutely,
Yeah.
the becoming more, the one of the biggest things I carried away from that is really understanding that everybody can do this. Everybody has different abilities, skills, if you will, or sensitivity,
Hmm.
but we're all connected. We can all work together. At that event, it was a little rocky at the beginning. There was some, logistic things that didn't get or coordinated well, but we all worked together. We got past that. And when we all came together in that room, everything changed.
Hmm.
You could
Hmm.
feel it. And it wasn't anything other than what we were interacting with each other.
Hmm.
And we weren't even talking. We were just sharing energy back and forth according
Hmm.
to Richard's guidance. And it
Hmm.
was just by doing that, just 2 days, it created connections that are permanent,
Mm-hmm.
permanent positive connections with people that I didn't know 24, 48 hours before the event. But I left there almost in tears
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't want to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not me. That's not how I am. It was very emotional. I took that as a very positive thing. I think a lot of guys, me being, I'm a biker, right? I'm a
Mm-hmm.
technology guy. I'm a biker. Martial arts and all that,
Mm-hmm.
tough, right? That doesn't mean you can't feel. That doesn't mean you can't connect. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's something that's very important. You don't have to put that tough front up. Let
Mm-hmm.
yourself feel, let yourself
Mm-hmm.
experience.
Mm-hmm.
Let all of that process through your soul, through your being. It will create a level of peace. There's no way to explain that to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
It's been such a short time for me, but I think it's really a lot of things have happened in a very short amount of time. And I think it's just because I got out of my own way.
But then it's
And
also, I'm learning too, like, I feel like when I first came into QuantumTouch, it's like, I want to share this. I want to tell everyone. I want to talk about it. And
yeah.
it's a feeling, and people will feel it. And when people are ready to feel it, they'll feel it. And it's really about just living in that energy. And I mean, we're always radiating out. People are going to feel it,
Mm-hmm.
and then they're going to come and they're going to experience it because it's not tangible. It's
No.
the energy. And people will start to sense that. So it gets really fun then when you're just playing in that energy, right?
You really connect to your childhood. And it's really
Mhm.
interesting because children are so good at this
Mhm. Mhm.
because they haven't gone through all of the society tempering that happens and
Mhm.
restrictions that get imposed on
Mhm.
you and limiting your thoughts, and they haven't gone through that yet. They're so
Mhm.
free and they're so
Mhm.
open and they're so
Mhm.
imaginative, and it's
Mhm.
really what you have to find. You have to find that imagination. You have to find that ability to picture things in your head and pretend, if you will,
Mhm.
to make that connection. And I think that's the thing that adults have a hard time with. Pretend,
Mhm.
why? That's silly.
Mhm.
No, that's exactly what we need to do, because that pretending is intention.
Mhm. Mhm.
And creating that intention, everything else will follow it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And we all do it in a different way. And it's so neat, so interesting to hear, like you and I talking here,
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
hear your perspective and your
Mhm.
story
Mhm.
versus mine and my
Mhm.
story, because we're all different,
Mhm.
but we all are going to the same place. When you realize that, then you realize you're not alone.
Mhm.
So that loneliness that you get from that self-isolation, from not being willing to look inward and not being willing to
Mhm.
confront those fears,
Mhm.
and I've been there. I mean, extended
Mhm.
periods of time where I felt like I was just the only person out there.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
if I could go back to that person, which you can,
You
right?
can.
You
I was just
can.
gonna say
Through quantum
that
touch, you
person's reaching
can
out
you
to
can
you
go
for a
back to that
reason.
person and love yourself, love that person, and
Mhm.
realize that you
Mhm.
it's going to be all right. And
Mhm.
I think maybe that's what got me through that period of time, was me now reaching back to myself then.
Mhm.
I don't know, it's so hard as a human to get your head around some of this stuff, to realize that time and space and distance, they don't matter.
Because even in my own story, I feel like there's so many times where I'm like, I don't know why I did that. I just felt like I was
Mhm.
guided or whatever. And now where I am now, it's like I'm always sending energy back to my past self or my future self and really just playing with that, right? Like when those memories come up, like even how you said you wanted to tell your past self, right? Remind them that they're not lonely. It gets really fun when we can do that because it's like the energy, the emotion, all of that is still stored in our bodies. So then we can become aware of it and connect with ourselves. And it just becomes this, the more we connect with ourselves, the more we can feel that connection outwards.
It permeates every part of your
Mm-hmm.
life.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of ways I still have a tendency to keep this part of myself separate from my day to day. But what
Mm-hmm.
I'm starting to realize as I go through my day, I find myself running energy when I'm driving or
Mm-hmm.
when I'm doing my job, and I'll start running energy, especially when I get frustrated or I
Mm-hmm.
get into a situation where I have to, it's still something I have to be conscious, and I have to remind myself, okay, is this how you feel? Well, start running some energy, start opening up your, connect with your heart chakra, start expanding that. It creates a calm, it creates a peacefulness just by doing that. You know, yoga and a lot of the Eastern spiritual philosophies, they teach you breath work. They talk about breath work because breath and breathing is energy. It's bringing that energy in. It's life. It's bringing that, breathing that in. While it's just physically air coming in, you're also bringing in everything around you. You're bringing in your environment. You're breathing it, and you're focusing it, and it's keeping you going. The energy comes with that. And so the more you do that, and the more you get used to that, doing it naturally, what happens is, what I'm finding is happening is I end up at a better place all the time. I don't have to put myself there. I've noticed the more I work with it, even when I do a session with somebody, I don't have to work as hard to bring the energy level up, to be able to focus it. It happens almost instantaneously now, because I've made that connection, and my self knows, my spiritual self knows what's going on. I've removed those blockages. I've flushed things out of my system. I've got that energy moving all of the time. So it's just a matter of focusing it now and receiving more. And the more I do it, the more I receive, the higher I go. It's a wonderful experience.
Absolutely. Life becomes the ceremony, right? Life is always going
Absolutely.
to show us the examples, put us in the situations where we need to re-experience that emotion, or it's going to come up, the cycles come up, and to get your attention. And it's really cool because now you have this skill, this technique. You can use quantum touch and run the energy. And I think a lot of it is just being present, right? Reminding us to be present in the day. And then what do we want, right? Allowing ourselves to dream. Like, what is our intention? I think that's a big hiccup too. We're not clear on what we do want. So our energy is just going wherever, or we're allowing ourselves to get distracted because we don't know what else to do.
Fear does
Yeah.
that. The fear to dream, because the fear of failure. But I
Mhm.
learned a long time ago, you only fail if you quit trying.
Mhm.
You know, never stop trying. Even in my darkest times, where I'd just be laying in my bed all day long, you know, I tried to do at least one thing,
Mhm.
wash the dishes or clean up something in the corner of my room, just one
Mhm.
thing, because then
Mhm.
at least I know I did something
Mhm.
positive. And you
Mhm.
just find one little thing and just
Mhm.
keep taking those steps. They're hard steps sometimes,
Mhm.
but do them. Do
Mhm.
them, keep going, don't stop. That's the only way you can fail, is if you
Mhm.
stop. And as long as you
Mhm.
keep going and you start being open to those connections, the answers will come. Sometimes it'll take a while, sometimes it won't happen as fast. I'm a very impatient person. I get excited about something, I get hyper focused. That's why I did so much in such a short amount of time, because like, oh my gosh, you know, I got so excited, and I started focusing on it,
Mhm.
reading the books and doing all this stuff. But when you do that, and you're focused on doing positive things versus negative things, you start moving in the right direction a lot faster.
Mhm.
It's just got me to the point where I want to just share this with everybody,
Mhm. Mhm.
because I felt like I was so different, that I was so isolated, that this is not, I was weird,
Mhm.
right? This energy thing is weird,
Mhm.
but I realize it's not.
Mhm.
It's the normal. It's what's
Mhm.
supposed to be normal. The
Mhm.
weird is what we've talked ourselves into. We owe it to ourselves, but we also owe it to our children
Mhm.
to teach them this. You know, Richard's vision, you know, is to have this being taught in schools and
Mhm.
to the young people, because
Mhm.
that's how we fix all of the things that are broken in society. You get overwhelmed and you feel like you can't make a difference in the world. What I started doing was I started like focusing less on the world and focusing on my world, the
Mhm.
things that I can affect, the people that I do come in contact with, and change my world, change
Mhm.
my interactions with the people
Mhm.
that I connect with. And that sets the example for them to do the same.
Mhm.
And I've not overwhelmed myself and reduced it. I think I've made a bigger difference
Mhm.
in more lives, because now those people are doing that for others.
Well, absolutely. And that just goes back to, I mean, we're radiant beings. The energy is always
Uh-huh.
radiating off of us. And I mean, I learned this as a mom, like my kids don't do what I say, they do what I do. And I mean, that just
Mhm.
ripples out. People don't do what
It
they're
does.
told to, right? You become that model. Really, you're just experiencing that yourself. And then you can't help but want to share that outwards. And people see and
Especially
people
kids, you know,
notice.
the kids, they'll do exactly the opposite of what you tell them to do. They absolutely will,
Yes.
just to see what'll happen,
Yeah.
or the
Yeah.
push the boundaries, or to exert their
Yeah.
independence. So in a lot of ways, you teach them a lot more by not telling them what to
Yeah.
do. You just keep them safe, right? You let them make mistakes. You let them, you know, you keep them focused in the right direction, but
Yeah.
let them, if it's not going to really hurt them or not, you know, let them experience what it is that you want them to learn. They're not going to learn it by you telling them. Let
Mhm.
them experience it, but just keep them going in the right direction,
Mhm.
and not be what's the term, helicopter mom, you know, that kind of
Mhm.
thing. And I think when you do that, you let them develop the independence and the life skills to be able to function and focus as they grow and become adults. And
Mhm.
I think that's
Mhm.
something that my parents did for me that helped me become a very independent person, not
Mhm.
so much by intention, but just by circumstance that ended up
Mhm.
happening. I look back and I realize that that's what's allowed me to be able to connect with myself
Mhm.
and grow more.
Mhm.
And it's not been easy. I think we've all gone through our own challenges and struggles, you know. But I think as we talk, like talking with you here and hearing your perspective and the things that you've gone through, it just reinforces that I said before, that we're all connected and that
Mhm.
we're all the
Mhm.
same.
Absolutely. I
Uh,
think and that's something I've really learned through the workshops and sharing this work is just how much you can pick up on and how much like we have way more in common than we want to admit. And it's like, what are those parts that we're still holding ourselves in shame and we don't want to talk about? Because I'm going to bet the other person's feeling that too. And I think the more we just become aware and like break down that, well, why do I hold this shame? Like, why am I holding on to this? Or why am I holding on to this anger? And like, and then just like detaching the shame around the shame and just
right.
letting it go. And I mean, that's one of the things I've always loved about this work is like, you have to be honest because if you're not, they're going to pick it up on your energy. Like, there's just so much more than what we've realized. And it's fascinating. And I think as long as you stay in that love, that vibration of love, it's so fun to just explore what is possible.
Absolutely. I mean, none of us are perfect, right? You know,
Mhm.
it's funny. I meet a lot of people that they'll spend time creating a story
Mhm.
around something when it's a simple thing. They won't tell you the truth, right? My kids have done. Did you do that? No, you know, and they'll create this story, or they'll try and deflect things. And you know, everybody knows that they're not safe. But if you put as much energy into just owning it, and that's
Mhm.
the other thing that I found is none of us are perfect. Own your
Mhm.
issues.
Mhm.
I think that's in a lot of cases the first step. Own it. I think a lot of the addiction counseling, you know, it's the first thing they teach you, is to
Mhm.
admit it to yourself that you've got a
Mhm.
problem.
Mhm.
And but see, you're not unique.
Mhm.
Everybody has problems. Just
Mhm.
own them,
Mhm.
and don't worry about judgment, because you're your
Mhm.
own worst critic.
Mhm.
Nobody's going to judge you worse than you're judging yourself. So just
Mhm.
own it.
Mhm.
And once you own it, then you can get past it. Then you
Mhm.
can be open to, okay, so I'm not so good at this, or I didn't do this right. I need to do better. So what's the next step?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
once you do that, you're not in your own way.
I mean, that
And
just goes into like blocks. People talk about energetic blocks. I'm like really fascinated by this, but that's essentially it. Like once you stop lying to yourself and you just see it for what it is, I mean, now you're at this awareness and you get a choice point. Like you get to choose. Are you going to continue to lie to
Mhm.
yourself about it and just hold on to that and clutch to it? Or do you want to put that energy into something else, right? What is your intention? And I know that, I mean, that's the humbling part of this work. And I love that I now am in this community with other people and you feel safe doing that and just seeing those parts of yourself and being honest. And I mean, that just goes into living with integrity too. And then it feels more peaceful.
It does. The rising tide raises all boats, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When you're in that environment, when you're in that ocean of quantum touch or that ocean of positive energy,
Mm-hmm.
everybody else is carrying the burden with you.
Mm-hmm.
So collectively, you're all raising at different
Mm-hmm.
rates, but you're getting there. It makes it feel less overwhelming
Mm-hmm.
and allows you to enjoy the moment
Mm-hmm.
much, much more.
Mm-hmm.
And to realize that the future is going to take care of itself. The past is the past. For me, it's been very difficult to learn how to live in the moment because I've always the present always hasn't always been kind. And so all I had was the future. All I had was the hope that it would get better. But if you are focusing too much on the future, you can't get there. You've got
Yeah.
to deal with the present.
I think that's where anxiety comes in. But when you
Mm-hmm.
trust that that future has already happened and you imagine that and you allow yourself to imagine that, right? Now you're sending your energy into that intention, into that future moment. And then it's kind of this like, oh, okay, well, that's done. It'll come. And I'm excited for how it's going to show up in my life. And I know that's helped
That's
me
a
kind of
hard thing.
get out of anxiety. Yeah, and I think it just comes with playing with it, right?
It
Like those
does.
moments of experiencing it. Because and I mean that's what I experienced with my fertility struggles. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
wanting to get pregnant was such a big thing that I was trying to control and like hyper focus, and there's so much anxiety around that. But the moment I just, well, this brings in surrender. The moment I just surrendered to, if I'm meant to have kids, I will have kids. And if I have kids, I'm going to love these kids. And I just imagine what that's going to be. And I just surrender to it will show up as it's going to show up, and I don't need to control that. And I mean, then that's when I got pregnant. And that theme I see just continues going through my life. Like, what am I trying to force? What am I really trying to force? Why am I trying to force? And a lot of it comes back to there's a part of me that doesn't feel like I'm worthy, and I need to force that
Mm-hmm.
outcome, because if I can create that outcome, then I can prove that I'm worthy. And the moment I become aware of when I'm trying to force an outcome and like, why am I trying to force that outcome? What's the root of that? And it normally comes down to some sort of, I'm not good enough. So I need that to prove that I'm good enough. But then if I just allow myself to remember that I am good, like it's such a weird thing when you actually think about it. Like I am good. We all are good. We don't have to prove ourselves. Then it's like, then you can take that anxious energy and just back into the present.
I'm glad you said that because that's still something I struggle with every day, and I guess we all do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you've been working with quantum touch far longer than me, but to hear someone with experience to say the same exact thing that runs through my head now, I mean, it's a reminder, right? It's a
Mm-hmm.
reminder to get out of your own way, be aware and in tune with yourself, and to accept. And it's really the key is if you've got to accept it. It's a really hard thing to do. I'm a fixer, right? I want to fix everything. I think a lot of guys are like that.
Mm-hmm.
They want to solve all the issues, be very pragmatic about things and
Mm-hmm.
logical, and it has its place, but you
Mm-hmm.
can't focus on that too
Mm-hmm.
much. Sometimes you've got to let go, and that's the part I have, and I think that's one of the things that keeps me from attaining a lot of the things that I want, because I haven't gotten in touch with that intuitive side of myself because I'm so stuck on the logical side because I'm a
Mm-hmm.
technical guy,
Mm-hmm.
and I've
Mm-hmm.
had to coach myself into not being so technical, not being so
Mm-hmm.
logical, and to
Mm-hmm.
just sense it, feel it, connect with the intuitive.
Yeah, it starts with having that intention, because then you're going to look for it, right? Like that's
Mhm.
how you choose to view the world now. But also, I feel like the more little experiences you have, the more you can trust, right? That stuff is just going to happen. And like just little things, like even little synchronicities, how they show up. Like yesterday, Thursday we were supposed to meet up with some other moms for a homeschooling group. It didn't work out. Like the planning it didn't happen, even though we always meet Thursday afternoons. And I was kind of bummed, and I was like, well, I guess it was meant to be, whatever. The next day I was like, okay, well, I'm planning to go here if anyone's free. And I was going to hang out with this one family, and then suddenly my plans changed and I was invited somewhere else and I went to this new park and there was some other families there and some families I was wanting to reconnect with. And I was like, wow, I couldn't have planned that if I tried. Like, those are just like little examples, like even in my day to day, like when my plans suddenly cancel and then something else comes up, but the more you can learn to just trust, like then the bigger stuff will fall into place too. Like that's how it feels for me in the smaller. Yeah. And it's cool for me because my kids get to experience that with.
Right. And you're teaching them, right? You're teaching them
Mhm.
not to sweat the small stuff.
Yeah. So it's
And
like they were upset that that play date didn't happen. And I'm like, it's okay, guys. It will work out. We're going to have fun.
yeah, what's
So,
the next positive thing we can do instead of that? Maybe there's something that we'll figure out that's even more fun. What's the adventure? Where's
mhm,
the adventure, right?
mhm,
Kids love adventure, right? Where's
mhm,
the adventure in a
mhm,
in a plan not working out? Let's find the adventure in this
mhm,
and create that positive perspective.
mhm.
Again, I say the words, right, but I need to live them myself, right? It's
I
funny
think we
because
all
when you have
fall
these kind
into
of
that.
conversations, we have these conversations and you start having like, hey, that's pretty profound. I probably should have thought of that before. But
Mhm,
see, that's when you're connecting with your higher self, with the love, with everything. And I think when something like that comes through and you have these epiphanies or these
mhm,
little things that you're like, where did that come from? That's reinforcement that you're doing what you need to do, that
mhm,
you're listening, that you're being
mhm,
open, just getting out of your own way. I think it's really the biggest lesson I've had to learn is just to get out of my own
mhm,
way and stop
mhm,
holding myself back.
mhm, mhm.
Um,
Well, and
and
believe
it's
it's
funny to
possible.
say, well, that's just it. That's one way of getting in your way is not believing it's possible and not dreaming and not
Mhm,
connecting with
mhm,
your inner child, so to speak. And
mhm,
and you just it's a hard thing to do to realize letting go is the way you get there.
mhm, mhm,
uh, it's just so
mhm.
counterintuitive to what we're
Absolutely.
taught.
I think that's just been a theme I continue to see in my own life, right? I'm trying to control an outcome, prove an outcome, whatever it may be. But it always happens for me when I just kind of surrender and let go and just trust that it will happen as it's meant to happen. And the more I have those experiences, the more I'm able to just stick into that present moment and feel that peace for what it is.
It's interesting because let me ask you this. How have those that you've been around for, many, many years that have known you for years reacted since you found quantum touch and started having this different perspective? Because you realize looking back, you're not the same person you were,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
How have people reacted to that with you?
I mean, that's obviously been a journey. I think some people in the beginning were really excited and some people were really put off. And also in the beginning, I was very much, I wanted to share this with everybody. So I probably was trying to push it more than I should have. I don't know if I like that, the way I worded that, but I was just really excited and I really wanted to help people. But I didn't understand that people need to be open and willing for this. And when they are ready, they will understand. But then I feel like it just brought up a lot of inner work on my own because it was easy for me to say, oh, they don't believe me. But really, that's just a belief in myself that they don't believe me.
Right.
So I feel like I'm at a different perspective now. A couple of years ago, I would have said, people don't believe me or whatever that story might be. And now I can see how I was holding on to that story myself. I think it's because there's a part of me that knows how unlimitedly potentially powerful we are. And I'm scared of realizing that. So it's easier for me to say they don't believe me or whatever that story might be to keep me from actually tapping into that potential. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Like, I want to hold on to that story that people don't believe me or people don't want to understand this or whatever, right? Blame it on the people. Like, it's so much easier to blame it on the people. But I'm now at a spot where I'm like, okay, I need to look into this. Like, why do I keep thinking that, right? And it's just uncovering that within myself. And people who have known me for a long time, like, they see it. And I'm at a space now where I'm obviously more acceptant of myself and of them where they're at. And I've stopped trying to initiate these conversations, allow myself to be grateful to have that relationship with them. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's more of an acceptance. I mean, some of these friends and families are experiencing miracles in their life, and it's really exciting. And I'm really excited for them to continue to connect the dots and experience it and where it's going to go. And it's like a different place now. And I think that's more accepting. Like, I'm more accepting of myself. I'm more accepting of where other people are. And I mean, in a greater scheme of the world, even.
Right.
Like, it's really easy to go down rabbit holes and all the such, but seeing how fast things can change when they need to change, and choosing to see the love in the situation has really brought in an optimistic view. And it's more of
You
like,
know what? I
I'm
mean,
so excited for when this becomes more realized. Like, I'm just so excited
yeah.
for that. And I just keep running my energy, I guess, into that, or into that future that has already happened.
That's why I feel so blessed in a way that things have happened for me the way, I get hard on myself because, it's been what, 30 years, 40 years since I learned to connect with energy and feel it. And,
Mhm.
I want to be hard on myself. But then I'm like, there's a lesson in that. The
Mhm.
lesson is very simple because once I got out of my own way, look at how fast I've
Mhm.
caught up with
Mhm.
those things that I was
Mhm.
holding myself back with.
Mhm.
And you can say it's been a short time, but it really hasn't been a short time. It's been a 40 some year journey. It's
Mhm.
just I finally got those blocks out of the way to let myself start to realize what has been there the whole time.
Mhm.
To fight that discouragement, to fight that negativity in yourself, increase judgment or those excuses. Like you said, when you're working with other people, we each have our own way of dealing with it. We're each in a
Mhm.
different place, and we each have our own goals and perspectives. And it sometimes you get bothered, especially if there's somebody that you're close to that might not be as open to this.
Mhm.
And you get frustrated and you're like, I don't want to ruin a friendship or I don't want to ruin a relationship, but you're not. I mean,
Mhm.
you're you're doing what you're supposed to do.
And it's that acceptance. And I mean, another thing is always finding common ground, right?
Hmm.
There's something that you can find in common ground and you can start there. I'm just like, I feel like it's taking the attachment out of the relationship and making the relationship what you need it to be, and just allowing it to be there. And I think then you're coming into the relationship with more
Right.
gratitude. And then it's
Yes.
just noticing in myself, why am I trying to force this in the relationship? Why do I need you to believe me? Right? It's almost, and this is something that I've kind of thought a lot about in terms of like, why do I need you to believe me to validate my belief? And once I take that away from the relationship and just be grateful for the relationship, it's more peaceful.
It's interesting because I see that if you think about society today, you're just watching social media, it's so polarized
Mhm.
that people get so upset because you're in Canada, I'm in the States. I remember during the political elections, if your candidate didn't get elected, then, the world's ending. Well, no, or you've got issues with a religion, or and this is why I have
Mhm.
a problem with
Mhm.
organized religion. It's like, look, we're all from the same place.
Mhm.
And just because someone doesn't believe what you believe,
Mhm.
if you really believe what you believe and you really have the
Mhm.
convictions that you have and you know that they're right, then it
Mhm.
shouldn't matter what anybody else believes.
Exactly.
If you feel bad about it or you feel negative about it, then that means that's a that's a threat to your beliefs. Then
Mhm.
that means you're not really sure
Mhm.
what you believe. You're not as
Mhm.
convicted as you think you
Mhm.
are. You're doing what everybody's telling you to do.
Mhm.
So you have to figure out what your values and your beliefs are. And once you really understand those
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
really believe them,
Mhm.
then it doesn't matter what goes on around you. And
Mhm.
if you have a problem with it, then maybe that's something you need to look at within.
Mhm.
Maybe there's something in you that needs to be corrected if you don't feel like you're in the right place to feel at peace with something somebody else is doing. And that's a hard thing for, I think, a lot of people and really anybody at times to do, but especially young people, because they don't know, they haven't had life experience. They haven't had, if I could, again, this is where I need to send energy back to my younger self to like be okay with it. Don't be so upset and don't judge. Don't be so judgmental, because we've all been in those places in one way or another. You fight that with love. You don't fight that with weapons, aggressiveness. You fight it with love.
Well, once again, it just comes back to connection, right? And when we can connect with ourselves, and then we'll be able to connect with others around us, right? We're not
absolutely
needing the validation to prove our point of view. We can just be, when we're at peace with ourselves, that peace is going to extend out.
Let me ask you this with regard to quantum touch. A lot of times I feel like it takes a lot of effort, a lot of focus. I find myself not running energy or not doing things as much as I should because I feel tired, or I feel, it's like I find excuses. Have you found that in your
journey that's fear,
that
right?
You think that's fear?
You're coming up to another level, or going to create, right? And it's going to, and you know what? The other thing that comes up with that is grief, because you know, if you run the energy to it, and you know, if you get clear on what you want, it's going to happen. And that means that something's going to change in your life, in your relationships. You're going to be letting go of who you are, who you were. And there's that element of grief. We're always grieving the version that we were. And I think that's something we don't talk about. And I experienced that very profoundly on the morning of day 2 of the Cancun Becoming More. It was because I knew I was going to change, and I didn't know how that was going to affect my relationships. And I love my relationships. And it was just this grief of then I think that comes in with the acceptance, right? You need to choose to step into that version of yourself. And people who are ready, I don't even know, that's not the word I want to say. I don't want to say ready. I feel like we're all divinely on our own path, and there's no judgment in that. And I think it's just accepting that the people are going to come into your life that need to be into your life, and you'll always get to cherish the ones that you had. I think there's that part of, we are grieving as we move forward or evolve or become that version of ourselves.
I think we're very much creatures of habit, right? You get used to a routine. You get used to doing things a certain way. When you have a profound change in your life, for better or worse, one thing or another, that disrupts that routine. It disrupts the things that you've gotten comfortable with. And I think it's the discomfort, which is really fear, that you have to fight against, because, I'll sit down, I'll be watching TV. I'm like, I should be meditating instead of watching TV, or I should be, not that there's anything wrong with watching TV, but, I'm starting to realize, that it's indicating a need for a change. If I'm feeling that way, then this is not helping me. Then that means I should be doing something else that is helping me. So maybe that inner voice that's telling you maybe you should be meditating instead of watching TV is not yourself. It's your higher self saying, guiding you. And that's one of those subtle things when your subconscious is trying to guide you on a better path. I think for someone who's trying to get their head around all of this, who's new to it, if they can take a look at it from that perspective, just a simple little inner voice telling you to do something a little different, and paying attention to it, listening to it, and not beating yourself up when you don't, right? Being hard on yourself, making the effort the next time, or making the effort to listen more and keep moving forward, instead of letting those small failures, those things that are insignificant, that really don't matter, keeping you from getting where you need to be.
I feel like the way I see that, like in terms of like changing a habit, or it's like I become aware that something's really not serving me, it's almost like it plays out as a timeline in my mind. And I can see, okay, if I continue down this path, like this is what it's going to look like, or I could change and do this. And then it becomes more of like a conscious choice of like, no, I'm ready for change. Like I'm ready because this is what I want. And I don't want to do that to myself anymore. But it always comes from more of a place of love and non-judgment.
You're right. You're right. What I've found is there's things I've let go of that I don't even realize I let them go.
Yeah.
There's things that I used to do that were habits or things that I've coping mechanisms,
Yeah.
whatever, that I just, when I look back over recent weeks, I'm like, I don't do that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not because it's not a conscious thing. It just happens. Sometimes people think, oh, if I can't do that anymore, let's take drinking, for example. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
people will have drinks,
Mm-hmm.
alcohol to deal with
Mm-hmm.
things. It's not a matter of not being able to do that as you become a better, I don't want to say better person, but as you improve yourself,
Mm-hmm.
what you'll find is you won't want to do things
Mm-hmm.
like that
Mm-hmm.
anymore. It's not because it's a judgment thing, a fear
Mm-hmm.
thing, like you see in a lot of religions, don't do this. These are your rules. These are your
Mm-hmm.
commandments.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a fear-based thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's because there's not a need for it. There's not
Mm-hmm.
a reason
Mm-hmm.
for it. There's not a motivation for it because your motivations are somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it goes away.
Mm-hmm.
You just grow
Mm-hmm.
out of it, so to speak. That's really
Yeah,
what it is. You grow out of it
you do.
because you're growing into something better.
Mm-hmm.
You always
Yeah.
get something better when you give something up.
Well, and I mean, alcohol is a great example. Like I used to drink a lot more in my past, and now like I enjoy a social drink, but even at that, sometimes I'm like, I find I don't even finish the drink. It's like, yeah, sure, I'll have a drink, and then I don't finish it because you just feel like, okay, this, I don't want to feel like this. Well, I guess with
You feel
alcohol,
better without it than you do with it.
yeah, I lose that feeling of who I am when I drink. And I
Right.
don't want to lose that feeling of who I am.
Exactly.
I mean, some taste really good and I enjoy the taste of them. Then I find I'm not finishing the drink. It's never been a rule, like I can't or I shouldn't, and I think that's a good spot to be with your habits, right? It's no longer I'm trying to control my body, I'm trying to control my habits. I guess that's that connection to self.
I'm working through right now, and a lot of people do this. I have a sweet tooth.
Mm-hmm.
Sugar is a
Mm-hmm.
real
Mm-hmm.
problem for me
Mm-hmm.
as you get these cravings.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Mm-hmm.
more research I do and the more
Mm-hmm.
things that I'm learning, I'm realizing that's really an inhibitor it's a block.
Mm-hmm.
A
Mm-hmm.
lot of those types of things, chemicals and things that you put in your body, are a
Mm-hmm.
block to moving energy.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm needing to make a choice in some cases as to, do I eat piece of pie or do I want to feel the energy and what I feel from that,
Mm-hmm.
eat more, right? Do
Mm-hmm.
I want to feel more energy? Do I want to eat it? We have free will.
Mm-hmm.
You can do either and you'll
Mm-hmm.
be fine either way.
Mm-hmm.
But which really do you want to do? What, or do you want more? And I find that those small choices that I make throughout the day are having a bigger impact when I choose what I know is right, what I'm being
Mm-hmm.
guided towards.
Mm-hmm.
And when I
Mm-hmm.
listen to that more, and then not beating myself up when I don't. And that can apply. Everybody has their own things.
Mm-hmm.
It might
Mm-hmm.
not be food. It could be alcohol. It could be drugs.
I mean, I have that too, where it's just you have that craving
Yeah.
that you want the sweet, right? But then I have to ask myself, I was like, what am I craving? And I think it's the nurture of it. It feels good. So what is my craving? And it's like that connection. And it's like sometimes I become aware of that and I'm like, I don't want to deal with this right now. I just want the sugar. But then I feel it doesn't serve me afterwards when I have the
No,
sugar
I think about
too.
it afterwards and I realize I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
It,
And
you
then
know,
And this is where I've heard, like Dr. Joe Dispenza would talk about how like, you're more addicted to that feeling of guilt or that
yeah,
feeling of I shouldn't have done that. And that's why you're doing the sugar craving and having it, which I find is fascinating. But there's something in that you're craving. And I ask myself that, what am I craving? What is it that I want? And most times it's some sort of like nurturing, connective energy, like more of a maternal, a feminine. And then this is where I use my quantum touch, and I'll go back and I'll give energy to myself as a child. And because there's
That's
just a part of me
interesting.
that wants to be nurtured and I want to just consume. But what is it that I'm really wanting to consume? What is it that I really need?
That's something I'll have to try. When I get those feelings, instead of getting the sweet tooth and grabbing a candy bar or whatever, to do it a different way, to replace that with running energy back to my earlier self. That's not something I had thought about doing. I'm going to try that.
Yeah.
We can talk in the future and see how that's worked out, because I think replacing those things that aren't quite good for you with the things that are,
Well, I mean,
over time they
logically,
reinforce
you don't want it, but we don't operate
right.
logically. It's emotionally.
No, we don't.
Emotionally, you need it. So then it's like, okay, well, emotionally, what do I need?
It's hard to find that out sometimes. It's hard to really boil that down, and because it's so subtle. It's not a black and white thing. And that requires that inner reflection, that inner connection to yourself to determine that. And sometimes it's not obvious. Sometimes even then it's like, I still don't know. I just simply don't know. When I knew I needed a different path, and when I knew I wasn't on the right path, or I needed something else, and I had that Akashic record reading, I just didn't know. But I'm like, you just have to just let it go. You just have to know that what I should be doing, even if I don't know what I should be doing, I know what I can do. And what I can do is meditate. What I can do is just be quiet and not dwelling on it, and just take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 3 minutes, and just quiet my thoughts. It doesn't have to be an hour and a half, 2 hours, just a lot of short 5 minute quiet times versus one long 60 or 90-minute quiet time. And
But I think we might be
replace it.
surprised. I
Yeah.
think it's one of these things I'm probably going to regret that I said these words, but it's like, I feel like the truth needs to be said. I feel like it's a lot easier than we're making it. But yeah, there's a part of us that is fearing that connection, it seems. And I think maybe that's just something we get
Yeah.
to discover. We can always tap into universal love. We can tap into it with our breath. So then my question is, why don't we?
Because it hasn't become a habit. We're creatures of habit, right? It hasn't become something that we move to in a situation of uncertainty. So you have to create that habit. And they say, do anything for 30 days and it becomes a habit. And I think that's true in a lot of ways. So I think just reminding yourself, finding a way to remind yourself that when that happens, to stop and breathe. Stop and breathe. You can't go wrong by stopping and breathing, and no matter what's going on. I think if you can just develop that, like I'm starting to develop the habit of running energy when I drive, or you'll find it. It'll come. And I say that for myself as much as I say that for anybody else, right? There's a lot of times you find the answers when you're trying to help somebody else. You find answers for yourself. You run energy to help somebody else, but you realize it's healing you as well. I've had a lot of problems since late 2020. I had a car accident, and I've had shoulder problems and neck problems, which I never really had before. And I found just in the short time that I've been working on healing others, that my own issues are starting to become less prevalent. It's not, I wouldn't say easy, but it's encouraging when you start to see that happen. Positive reinforcement to keep doing it.
Well, and then
to
that's
know
the
that you're
power
not the
of
only one.
community.
Exactly.
Right?
Having conversations like this and being able to do that. And, you and I are thousands of miles away from each other, but yet it's like we're sitting in the same room. Leverage the technology to be able to make these connections and reinforce them, share them with others. That's why I think, what you're doing here with your channel is very uplifting and very positive.
Thank you. I think I really appreciate you coming on, and we're having this chat today. And I think it just uncovered some power here.
I've been
Definitely.
looking
I know
forward
it's
to it all week,
definitely
and I'm
made some connections for myself, and where I'm like, oh yeah, we're gonna get some
maybe
changes
we
here.
should do it
So
more often, right? maybe we can uncover some more things.
Mhm.
It'd be interesting to see what kind of feedback you get from your viewers of this. I'd really be interested, and maybe we can come back and address any comments that you might get and continue the conversation, because I think other things get uncovered over time. Finding Quantum Touch, it's just been such a learning experience, but such a positive, it's had such a positive effect on my life in so many ways.
It's so important to have these conversations, right? Have this space for expansion and just see what comes through. I want to keep having these conversations too. So I think it's really beneficial for everyone.
Wonderful. It's so amazing.